It's a fourth goal for Sam Kerr. It's a horrible moment for Nicole McClure.
Here's Aloisi for a place in the World Cup. He's scored! Australia have done it! Come on! John Aloisi, the Confederations Cup hero! It's going to be Isaias. Oh! Isaias, the Spaniard! Si, senor! Si! Atkinson did well. The boy from... Oh, my goodness! Oh, my goodness! Have you seen a more freakish goal in A-League history? Riley McGreen with a scorpion kick into the top corner.
You know the A-League men is really back when in the singular weekend we have broken nets before a game, Ryan Grant practically knocking out Chris Beath in a big blue, Valon Barisha, one of Melbourne City's new signings, swearing in his first post-game interview, kids pitch invading to get a TikTok with Nanny and being on Channel 10, Adelaide leaving it late once again, and the conspiracy of Robbie Thompson swearing in the commentary box during Melbourne City versus Western United. Hello and welcome to the Aus Football Weekly podcast, and today I'm joined by a special guest, creator of the Coast Watch Football YouTube channel, Lockie. How you going?
Hey mate, I'm doing really, really well. Very much enjoyed that opening weekend of A-League football, and yeah, very happy to be here to break it all down with you.
Yeah, it's been a really good weekend in terms of crowds. You know, games have been pretty entertaining. A shame that the F3 derby had to be called off, but other than that, you know, I think it's been a pretty good weekend.
Definitely, absolutely, plenty of entertainment. And yeah, big shame about that F3 derby. I was there at the stadium, and it was absolutely a swimming pool. So, aside from that, it was I think a very positive weekend for Australian football.
Yeah, let's have a quick talk about the Central Coast game. As you said, you were there at the stadium. What was it like just having to wait there, really? Yeah,
I mean, it was tricky. There was a sense of confusion, you know, in the stands. And, I mean, just the crazy thing was how the deluge came out of nowhere so quickly. For most of the day here on the Central Coast, it was overcast, but it wasn't really raining at all.
Yeah.
And then I think kickoff was at 5 p.m. local time. And from about 4:30 onwards, I might have even been a little bit later, it just started bucketing down and did not stop. And usually Central Coast Stadium is pretty good with rain.
Yeah.
I can't recall the last time a game was washed out. It's been years and years, but it was just covered in water. And I was like, there's no chance this game's going ahead.
Yeah.
So, look, it's a big shame because both teams were. Very much looking forward to obviously starting their new A-League campaigns to reasonably new-looking sides, Newcastle and Mariners. But yeah, I guess we have to wait till round two to get things underway.
Yeah, it's probably the game I was most looking forward to that weekend, just because of the sort of, you don't know really what to expect in that sort of game. You know, I would think Central Coast and Newcastle. I think Central Coast have the slight edge, but you know, I think pretty equal in terms of everything. But yeah, it would have been an interesting one. And even on the broadcast, you could see, like, I think they were warming up for like half an hour. Like, you could see them warming up, and then just before the game, pretty much, only we got told on broadcast, it's been delayed. So had to watch the more boring option of Brisbane versus Macarthur. But we'll get on to that. We'll start on the Friday with Melbourne City versus West United, the season opener, a grand final rematch. Your general thoughts on that?
I thought it was a pretty decent game. It was very much and I think this was a common theme across the weekend, maybe aside from the Big Blue, that I found that there were a lot of teams still sort of not just figuring each other out, but figuring themselves out. But obviously this was a big game. I mean, the grand final rematch, and I was expecting a pretty tight affair, but it was certainly Melbourne City who were the better side in that game. Yeah. Valon Barisha certainly was a highlight. I mean, he sort of made an instant impact in that game, and I thought looked really, really lively on the ball. Scott Jamieson playing at centre back. I mean, Melbourne City had to do a bit of reshuffling with their lineup. They were missing, you know, some key personnel. But still, of course, have that deadly front line, and Jamie McLaren pounced on a rare Lee Lacroix mistake. And that's what, you know, let Western United down in the end. I don't think it was an overall poor performance from Western United, but Melbourne City just on the day with a better side. And look, West United is still a very strong team. I'm interested to see sort of how Previc comes back into the side. We've been hearing sort of rumours of whether he'd be returning or not throughout the off-season, but he is still here. Diamante as well, like how much does he feature this season, if at all? Two teams who I think will have a strong season. But yeah, well played by Melbourne City, who came away with 3 points in the end and probably deserved a better result. I mean, it was only a 1-goal margin in the end. Western United and Milanovic getting that late consolation goal, but overall a decent game to open the weekend. That's for sure.
Yeah, they had that goal disallowed from Jamie McLaren for the I think it was the Matt Leckie on Gariccio, I think it was.
Yeah, the foul. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
It was one of those ones where I can sort of see, like, I think depending on what team you support, it was one of those ones that just could have gone either way. Yeah. In the end, I'm okay with the decision, but had it gone the other way, I wouldn't have been upset either.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah. Again, my standout to City was probably Valon Berisha. Putting in balls on both feet. Shows his versatility and just his quality on the ball, only coming from French First Division as well, on loan. So great signing. I thought for Western United, James Charisi was surprisingly probably my highlight. I thought the signing was a bit different compared to what I've seen, but he was probably, had that shot in the first minute. I think, had a good start. I thought it was pretty good. And the Previc thing as well. I checked out the ins and outs as the lineups came out, and I saw that he was in the extended squad, so he was, by all accounts, ready to play, prepared, but sitting in the stands. So, yeah, interesting one. And again, Leo Lacroix, like, what the hell is going on there? Like, after last season, like, such a surprise to see someone who was so reliable at the back for Western United, sort of the thing you'd be scared to try and get past. Just do what he did. Like, I don't even know how to explain it really. It was a weird one. But yes, that was 2-1 to Melbourne City. Again, the grand final opener. Then we move on to the Saturday between Brisbane, Macarthur, as of course Central Coast and Newcastle were supposed to be playing at the same time, but that one, as we spoke about, was rained off. So again, your thoughts on Brisbane, Macarthur?
Yeah, and as you sort of said before, everyone had to watch that game, and it was a shame because it was probably the most quiet game, I guess, across the whole weekend.
Yeah.
But still, again, as I mentioned, sort of one of those games where the teams are sort of still figuring each other out, and there was promising signs from both sides, and I mean we've seen it from Macarthur, who of course won the Australia Cup, that they're showing pretty promising signs this season with combinations between De Villa and Arzani and De Silva. Like everyone's really excited about that team on paper, and to see how Dwight York's going to go in the A-League. But I thought as Brisbane, I mean, watching back the game, I thought probably had the better chances throughout the majority of the game, and Charlie Austin with a couple half chances, a couple of chances that I probably would have expected a striker of his quality to put away. Especially a team, they're going to need that, Brisbane, especially because they were lacking that last season, like a real sort 100%. Of consistent goal scorer. But look, it was the big positive off the field, if you like. Well, inside the stadium, though, is the stadium itself in Suncorp Stadium. I think it's epic to see Brisbane Roar playing back at Suncorp Stadium, a fantastic ground that has seen a lot of historic A-League clashes over the years. And hopefully they get more games there next season. I know I think they're only playing a few games there this season. But yeah, one of those funny games where neither team, I thought were performing though at full throttle, like we were absolutely going for it. So a 0-0 result in the end, probably a fair result. But again, it's one of those games where either team easily could have snatched the win at the end. But I think across both teams, Brisbane will probably feel more disappointed that they didn't come away with 3 points.
Yeah, I thought Armiento was, again, probably my highlight of that Brisbane team. After having did his ACL, I'm pretty sure, with Perth last season, looked good for Perth. His highlight game I can remember from there was probably that weird 5-4-1 against Western United. That crazy one. He was really good in there. And that was the last time I remember him having a real standout game. Of course, a former Adelaide player. That's how we make him. He was probably my standout. There was an open goal that MacArthur missed even as well from Victoria to Anthony Carter. That was horrendous. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting, especially after the Australia Cup final, just to see sort of how Dwight York would set up against an A-League side compared to what he has done in the preseason, so-called, in the Australia Cup against, only Wellington Phoenix being their only A-League side, the rest being NPL sides or lower, even in the case of Modbury Jets from Adelaide. So it was a really interesting one. I expected most of these games to end 0-0 this weekend, just as precaution, really. But one game I definitely expect to end 0-0, and it didn't, was the Big Blue between Sydney FC and Melbourne Victory. The game of the weekend, undoubtedly, on that Saturday night, on free-to-air as well. Great stadium, great fans. Your opinion?
Yeah, epic. And just from like a neutral point of view, great for that stadium to be back and being in use in the A-League. And it looks so epic, just watching on TV, and I can't wait to get there as a fan later this season. But yeah, like a fantastic game. Obviously, one of the big stories as well was Nani playing, and he had a couple of really nice moments here throughout the match as well, which was good to see. You want these big marquees, performing. We don't want another Daniel Sturridge situation. But yeah, man, it was like a really, really exciting game and back and forth, especially in that second half. And, James Donachie coming back with that equaliser to make it 2-2. And then a couple of those two victory goals in the second half were really impressive, though. Just the ball movement and how precise they were just goes to show that Melbourne Victory well and truly are going to be potentially the team to beat this season. I mean, again, it's just 1 week into the campaign. But, I mean, Nani, Falami, Jake Brimmer, D'Agostino looks hungry for goals and potentially chasing a spot in the World Cup squad.
Yeah.
It's such a strong team and so much depth. I mean, they were even missing a couple of players in this game, Melbourne Victory, but they were still so strong. And, I mean, I tipped Sydney FC in this game just because I thought with the big occasion returning to the stadium that they would have gotten the win. And, from their point of view, I thought Robert Mack looked pretty decent. Joe Lolly with a couple of chances as well. I think the new formation is a good move. Just they needed to try something different, sort of the 4-3-3. I like the change by Steve Corica. But they don't want a repeat of last season's Sydney FC, especially I remember like the early part of the campaign. I can't remember how long it took for them to get a win, but it was like the first 4, 5, 6 rounds or something that they didn't win a game. They don't
I was watching
want
the
to,
documentary the other day.
It
was something like that.
Yeah, they don't want to repeat that at all, and especially for Steve Corica, who I think is under so much pressure. And I mean, he's got a strong squad. He's got some good names in that team. I worry for their depth though this year, Sydney FC. But Steve Corica will be especially relying on those star players to perform. But yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, game of the round for sure. I mean, it's so much fun watching from a neutral point of view. And a fantastic stadium, as I mentioned. So great to see the round ball game being played there once again.
Yeah, I was really interested with how Victory were going to go, because when you look at their squad in the off season, they didn't. Nani was their biggest signing, but they didn't. I mean, they didn't have to change anything. But there's no one really new that like is a starter. Like they brought in reinforcements like George Timotheou, Nathan Konstantopoulos, Tommy Juric, even as a backup for
Noah
D'Agostino.
Smith as well.
Noah Smith as well from Central Coast. And then Sydney with, again, Robert Mack, my man of the match. I didn't put him in my fantasy team. I put Joe Lolly instead, who also had a half decent game. That front line, I reckon in weeks to come will start looking very, very dangerous. Just being able to put in balls to Adam Lafondra, which is probably what he's needed, especially this new formation should help him out a bit. He's been sort of just on a bit of a drought for the past, I reckon, last season or so. It's just it was a good game, and the fans, there was enough fans. I think it was like 1,200 Melbourne Victory fans came around as well. Stadium looked great, especially even on broadcast. It looked really good. Looked almost filled.
Considering the weather as well. I mean, I know it was raining heavy down there in Sydney.
Completely forgot about the weather as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that sort of obviously dampened things a little bit, but it was great that looking at the Cove. I mean, we want active support to obviously to build up in numbers again, and it looked like the Cove in that safe standing area was looking pretty strong as well. So really, really good to see. But overall a really, really good sort of to have that signature game, sort of the headline game, if you like, from round one to be. It was a successful occasion. It wasn't a 0-0 in the end. It was a pretty entertaining game, and two sides who I'm sure we should be keeping an eye on come this season.
definitely. And from one homecoming to another homecoming on the Sunday between Wellington and Adelaide, I will do my best to not give a biased perspective of this game. But just quickly, I thought that we weren't that bad. We were probably lacking Hiroshi Ibisuki as our striker. I saw we put in a lot of high balls, which normally you've got Hiroshi on the end of, just putting him in. Ben Halloran looked great. Harry van der Sarg was really surprised me. I wasn't expecting him to start at all, but moving Javi Lopez to left back and having him at right back for sort of that first half and a little bit more, it really worked. He put on some good runs, good balls in. And I reckon start that game with Craig Goodwin, we go a bit better. And probably the red card helped us a little bit, even though I think we were definitely the better team. Unlucky with the Gauchi mistake to lead to the goal. But, your thoughts as well.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of agree with you there. I thought Adelaide were pretty good, and especially for most of that first half, I thought Adelaide dominated. We're on the front foot for a lot of that first half. And that red card was obviously a big moment in the game, and it was one of those interesting ones where, for me, it was a red card in the end. But I can see how, like, he was flying in, but it did certainly look like a slip. Like, he definitely lost his footing.
It was unfortunate that he slipped, but I still think it was a red.
and it was one of those ones where, like it was definitely a red card, but there wasn't enough evidence for them to overturn it. You know what I mean? So, look, it was, and that's from a Wellington point of view, that was really disappointing, because those Phoenix fans were really excited to see the three sort of foreign players. They had Kraev on the left, Sass, who got sent off playing on the right, and Zawada through the middle, who had a couple chances throughout the game, and all looked pretty decent throughout, but obviously unfortunate for Sass early on to get sent off. But that's classic Phoenix spirit to come back, especially after how that first half was going. I was like, Adelaide's dominating, and Phoenix just got to play a sent off. I was like, this is worrying for Phoenix here. They could get smashed. And credit to Phoenix, who showed that heart and spirit, which they obviously showed so much through last season to make it into the top six. To get in front. And I was worried for Adelaide. I was like, oh no, like, you don't want to see it, like, I'm sure you were feeling that way, watching your team, you had that extra man on the field and your team was down. Luckily, Ben Halloran back at the club, getting the club out of danger, getting the team out of danger there at the end to rescue a point, which was, I don't want to say probably is a fair result in the end, because the Wellington were threatening more so in that second half. But, I mean, both sides. This is another one of those games where I thought probably weren't at their best and still figuring things out. And like you said there, I mean, Craig Goodwin, Hiroshi Ibisuki, two players who were fantastic throughout the back end of last campaign. So, if those players starting, then as you say, they'd probably get 3 points in a game like this. Yeah,
we were definitely still lacking a bit of magic with the likes of Craig Goodwin, even Nestor Nkunda, who's been on fire for under-17s duty for Australia. But instead we saw the debut of Musa Toure, which I thought was great. The third and final one, I think, for now, unless they choose to have more. Wellington, it's just a frustrating game, really, because it was the whole time you knew you were dominating. I thought we definitely deserved a goal so much earlier than the 93rd minute. And just really frustrating. And Zach Cluff, who I've been looking forward to, heard and seen a lot of good things about in pre-season. It was much better than I think he was last season. He had a few shots in, got one to Ollie Sales Jules, unlucky with that straight at the keeper. I'm pretty sure that was the one that led to the final minute corner for Ben Halloran, who, like you said, has come back from Korea. I don't think he only played one game in Korea, just didn't work out for him, which was a shame, because I thought, he is a great player. Played in didn't play. I think he was called up to the 2018 Socceroos squad. And then Wellington, with new signings like Jan Sass, got sent off. Kraev, I thought, was very decent. Zawada, who, to be honest, I didn't see this signing, but he didn't look too bad. Had a few chances. There was that little flick over, I think it was, I don't remember who the centre back was. One of our centre backs shot straight on a goal at Joe Gauchi. He didn't look too bad. Ollie Sale had a half decent game, I thought, as well. I thought it was an interesting game. Probably one of the better ones of the weekend. So on to the final game of the weekend, Western Sydney Wanderers versus Perth. I half watched this one because I was sort of watching the F1 and this at the same time, which got delayed, so I ended up watching most of this. Yeah, it was an interesting one. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this was the game the most out of all of them where I felt that the case was both teams sort of figuring themselves out. There's so many new players on the pitch, and this was one of those games where I was like, I was watching the game and I had my phone with me, just like checking the lineups at the same time. I was like, who's that again? I was like, oh yeah, cool. Really.
Yeah.
It was like so many new names that we're not used to on both sides, and I thought Wanderers were. That probably deserved the win in the end, and for Perth Glory, unfortunately for them in this game. But I'm sure they will improve this season, Perth Glory. But we're just struggling to sort of create anything in attack. I remember in that first half alone, I think both sides combined had a total of 5 shots across 45 minutes of football, which wasn't amazing. But yeah, Kuripic, the Bosnian striker in the end, grabbing that goal, which was a scrappy goal in the end, and almost had 2 with the penalty, which would have made an epic A-League debut for him. But I was really excited. I think just seeing, I think there's potential in that Wanderers squad. I mean, when you look at Borello, Ninkovic playing off the left-hand side. I'm blank. Cassini Yengi was playing on the left wing, which was interesting as well. Callum Neuenhoff, which I think Wanderers voted as their player of the match, was fantastic playing in midfield alongside Amalfitano. So many new names. But the thing that stood out for me in this game was how Ninkovic was being played in sort of a central role, in that centre attacking mid role, whereas at Sydney FC for the past few years he's been playing out wide on the left. And I think that central position suits Ninkovic a whole lot more because he's surrounded by, he's not just creating off the wing. He's surrounded by players he can feed. Borello down the right, Yengi down the left. He's got the striker ahead of him. He's got the 2 defensive midfielders behind him. I think that's going to be a position that really allows Ninkovic to flourish. And he had some good moments in this game. And, that was one of the big sort of, a lot of people had criticisms of Ninkovic making this move. And even Wanderers fans weren't happy about it because they thought he was past his prime. But, look, if the other players around him can do all that legwork and just let Ninkovic make the passes, string the play together, set it up, it could be a really dangerous system for Western Sydney Wanderers. And timed up defensively as well. I mean, they kept a clean sheet. Marcelo, the new captain at the back for Wanderers. Lawrence Thomas in goals as well. Had to make a couple saves, key saves throughout this game. I haven't even touched on Perth Glory, but they had a number of new players as well. Mark Beavers at the back, the tall centre-back, English centre-back, looked pretty decent. But yeah, overall, for the takeaway for me for this game was 2 teams figuring themselves out, absolutely not at their best. But if one of these teams is going to be a top 6 side, or just purely off watching this game, it's going to be Western Sydney Wanderers. There's more potential there. Perth Glory, Ruben Zakovic, I'm a little bit more concerned about how they're going to go, especially playing, the first 5-6 games away from home, I think, this season.
With Western Sydney, I'm looking at the starting lineup now. I think looking at it, 10 of their starting 11 players, ridiculous, which is, to be honest, it's what it's been like every season for the past few years.
True.
And we even say this is the season, but it never seems to be. But they need to start performing. I think definitely. Marcelo has been a really underrated signing. I think so much quality and just hasn't really been looked at. I think, has that quality. Played for Lyon only a few years ago. Still not too old. But yeah, very interesting. Ninkovic was fine. I think, for a starting debut, had interesting approach going forward. And then, Cassini Yengi on the left, I thought was really interesting because at Adelaide, we only really played him as a central striker, where he was able to pretty much just run at defenders and just have a shot off. So it was really interesting having him on the left.
I don't think.
Brandon,
I was just going to say as well. I mean, just on Yengi, while you touched on it there, I feel like it's probably not a position that he wants to play in as much. I feel like he probably flourishes more in that central striking role.
Yeah.
But I think to get starting football, he'll probably be happy to play in wherever the coach puts him, Mike Redan. But I don't know about you. Being an Adelaide fan, you saw Yengi come up through the system, and he seems like the kind of player who I think operates a little bit better through the middle, especially after watching him at the Olyroos Under-23 Asian Cup.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it was a shame that obviously we couldn't keep him. I think he would have been a good option to have as well as Ibasuki for some games, rather than just him just coming off the bench or just starting all the time. just as a bit of variety. They're both tall strikers, but Yangi's got a bit more pace than Iwasuki. Keeping a clean sheet I think was really important as well for Lawrence Thomas, who I think had a very decent game. Pretty much I paid attention to this one quite a lot more because in my fantasy team it's starting to ruin me. And then Perth Glory, again, so many new signings as well. I think that's McAnuff, Khalifi, Duncan's on loan, Musti Amini now the captain, Williams, and Beavers as well. I thought Beavers had a good game. Mustafa Amini, at least he's finally getting game time. Probably didn't play enough at Sydney for a player of his quality. A Socceroo, still not too old. I think just needs to get regular game time. So I think it's perfect for him at Perth, being the captain now, almost sort of guarantees him every week.
I think he's going to be key as well for Glory. I mean, he was sort of playing that defensive midfield role, and it was allowing, I think it was Zach Duncan and McAnuff who were just playing ahead of him to flourish. So he's going to be that key player, especially after, I was really surprised how they let Brandon O'Neill go. We don't know, obviously, behind the scenes what happened with that move, but Brandon O'Neill, who was the Glory captain last year, heading over to Newcastle. But I think this could be a big year for Mustafa Amini, I think.
Yeah, and even Bruno Fornaroli, the Socceroo we can call him now, had a bit of a blank game, had a decent season last season until Primo Show's injury that ruled him out for most of the second half. He's their key, really. He's the player that you go to get those goals. I can't see them coming from a lot of other places, really, and especially like you said, they're playing even when they do go back home, they're playing out of Macedonia Park, not even HBF Park, which would be interesting for broadcast. I think it would look really interesting, like an old NPL game or an NSL game even. So that game ended 1-0 between Western Sydney and Perth Glory at CommBank, and that's all the games for the weekend. But we'll just quickly touch on the Matildas. Their games against South Africa and their game on Wednesday against Denmark. We are 4-1 win against South Africa. Sam Kerr on the bench at home, technically, when you think about it. In Kingsmeadow at Chelsea. Courtney Vine at the double. I thought it was a game we definitely needed to win in preparation. Them being, the African champions, needing to test ourselves. Denmark, I think, is going to be the real test. I think we played them just when Tony Gustafsson was sort of coming in, and we lost, I think, maybe 2-1. So that wasn't, out of the other ones where we played against the Netherlands and Germany, where we got thrashed, probably one of the better results. Your thoughts on the South Africa game?
Yeah, it was the result was obviously the most pleasing thing, especially after over the past, I don't want to say 12, 18 months now. Some of the results have been pretty mixed. I mean, I remember specifically watching the friendlies before the last round of friendlies, the Spain and Portugal friendlies, studying them pretty intently. And those were games where we sort of rotated the squad quite a bit and weren't quite playing our strongest squad. For me, this is a time where we need to be sort of fielding our strongest squad. I mean, we're heading into, we're less than 12 months. It's coming around real quick, our own World Cup in our own country. And we should be happy. There's no reason why we shouldn't be having aspirations to win the whole thing. So this is the time to be playing our strongest squad. And, as you mentioned, I mean, Courtney Vine on score sheet, that's fantastic. I think she could potentially be a star at this upcoming World Cup. But this is the time where we have to be deploying our strongest squad, and because there is pressure on Gustafsson as well. I mean, we've sort of been seeing it growing every time we fail to get a result, and that was growing even more after the Canadian friendlies not too long ago. So look, main thing, positive result. We want goals. We want a strong, not simply obviously just a result, but a strong performance as well. But the Denmark game, as you mentioned there, I think is going to be the big test to sort of really see where we're at with some of the top sort of, I guess, European sides, especially after only a few months ago we really struggled against Spain and Portugal. Against Denmark, we need to see improvement. We need to see that we can get at least a result. I think if we could at least get a draw, that will be all right. But we want to see that we're moving in a positive direction. And look, I still have faith in Gustafsson that he can turn it around. But we need to be getting the results and the performances now because the World Cup is certainly coming around pretty quick, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the main takeaway, it was a negative one from the South Africa game, was probably not keeping a clean sheet. Even though we were 4-0 up at the time, conceding, it felt like they had a last minute equaliser or we lost. Like, it just, Yeah, it was a real shame, but that was probably my biggest takeaway from the South Africa game. And yeah, like I said, Denmark, the bigger test. We played them, like I said, 2-1 scoreline last time, really close. Hopefully Sam Kerr starts if she's not ill as she was for the South Africa game. Just because we need her. Like she is the key to everything that we do. Pretty much, everything goes through her a lot of the time. And hopefully we get to see some minutes for the new players coming in, like Remy Seamson. Matilda McNamara hasn't started a game yet, hasn't played a game for the Matildas yet, but she's been called up twice, and just sort of rotate around the squad. And just one thing I want to ask you about Avi Lewick. What do you think about that? Her still being aging, coming out of international retirement. What do you think?
Oh, look, if she's going to provide value to the squad, if Tony Gustafsson believes there is a role for her to fit, then absolutely. I mean, I have faith and trust in the coach. And the one thing, I mean, that we can say about Tony Gustafsson and the players is that he seems to have a pretty good relationship with the players as well. He seems to, be really invested in the squad. I love seeing him on the sidelines he always wearing that scarf or whatever,
And the Backstreet Boys microphone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But look, if Lewick is going to provide, that experience, which is going to be important because there are a number of young players, still coming through the squad. I feel like maybe over the next few years we're going to see a bit of sort of the next generation sort of really sort of come up and make their stamp in the squad. But look, Lewick is going to bring that experience, which is especially going to be crucial for the World Cup next year. We're going to need those key players like Lewick and like Sam Kerr now as well, who, as you sort of touched on there, she's a star of the team, and specifically with Sam Kerr, we want to make sure that she's going to this World Cup in red hot form. Like we want to make sure the opposition teams are scared to face Australia on home soil with Sam Kerr leading the line. That's it's going to be a big one.
Yeah, that's a team still lacking with Ellie Carpenter as well, who's normally probably one of my favourite players to watch the Matildas. Hopefully, I think she's coming back soon. She's doing training from what I've seen. So yeah, it's been interesting. Before I let you go, one last talking point. The Socceroos World Cup starts in a month, I think now. It's close.
It's coming so quick.
What do you think the squad should look like, or a starting 11 even?
Yeah, look, I think the starting 11 is pretty nailed down for maybe 7 or 8 positions are pretty locked down. Obviously, Maddie Ryan, just to sort of quickly breeze through it. Beige, I thought has looked good this year.
Scored for Dundee not too long ago as well.
Yeah. With Sainsbury, I think, is always a consistent performer as well. At right back, whether it's Karacic or Atkinson, both are solid picks as well. I am pretty sold on that defensive midfield partnership of Moy and Irvine. And who knows whether Tom Rogic is going to be involved. I think he's a class player. I'd love to see him involved.
And even the question with Harry Sutar as well, whether he comes back as well and plays enough with Stoke.
Yeah, we'd love to see Harry Sutar in there because he's obviously just an absolute beast, and we'd love that. We love that height and strength in our back line. And but yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is going to be with sort of the handful of players, and they're more so attacking players who A-League players who are sort of vying for a spot in this team. When you talk about, I mean, I mentioned earlier Nick D'Agostino, but you're also talking about Jason Cummings and Garen Kowal, who's got so much hype around.
Even Daniel Larzani starting to make a point as well.
Yeah, and that's what's going to be really exciting about sort of this opening month or so of A-League is that there's 6 rounds, or 5 now, for players in the A-League to stake their claim for this World Cup squad. And it's not a lot of time. So they're really going to be, trying to play out of their skin. You being an Adelaide United fan, I'm a massive Craig Goodwin fan. I think Craig Goodwin should be on the World Cup squad. He was fantastic in obviously the playoffs a couple of months ago. He started at, I'm pretty sure the one, I can't remember if he started against Peru, but he definitely started against the UAE. I'd love to see Craig Goodwin in there. I think regardless of how much, even if if he doesn't play that much football, I think he needs to be in the squad. I think he's a fantastic player. But yeah, I think the main thing for me is just really interesting to see which of those plays and that handful, just the sort of fringe plays, if you like, are going to step up. And all of them have the potential to, but it's going to be a matter of sort of who's hungry enough to get onto the plane.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things is probably the attacking options that you have, because you've got Graham Arnold who has favourites in Mitch Duke, James, all those sorts of players. But then you've got up and comers like Jason Cummings and Garen Cole, who I think should definitely be in the squad just as that X factor, that Daniel Arzani type of player, just to sort of bring off the bench and just create havoc. Be really interesting. And then Matty Ryan, I've seen as well, like recently hasn't even been starting for Copenhagen. There's been discussions whether or not, he is the starting keeper for the World Cup, whether Mitch Langrak comes in. And yeah, even like I said, Harry Suter is probably the one I'm probably wanting to play the most.
Yeah, me too.
He's been great. It's a shame, obviously, the ACL injury. I think it was against Saudi Arabia in Australia. Just hopefully he gets back to full fitness and able to come, even just be there.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, so that's everything for today. That's all the topics that we've got. Thank you so much for joining me, Lockie. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I'm always down to chat football, and it's an exciting time with the Gaelic underway and the World Cup just around the corner as well.
Yeah, it'd be great to have you back. But thank you so much for listening to the Aus Football Weekly podcast, and we'll see you next week.